And now we've still got something between you and the lunch, and this is kind of I know this is kind of tough spot, but I know that this gentleman can take it. Next we're going to be talking about the one exploration in the domain that has been usually dominated by humans. And this will be presented by the machine learning partner of Fourkind, Jarno Kartela, and he will be serving us some whiskey before the lunch. Welcome, Jarno.
Thank you. Great. So, yeah, I'm the last frontier between you and lunch, and I was thinking about like how should I start this talk. So this is going to be a bit different than the previous ones that you've heard. I'm going to talk about creative AI, meaning that what do we speak about when we speak about computers assisting us with creative tasks. And funnily enough, we're going to wrap it around whiskey because, you know, who doesn't like alcohol? The sort of main frame that we have is that during the first years of machine learning, we talked a lot about automation. We did a lot of reinforcement learning. We did a lot of robotic process automation. We did a lot of recommendation engines and so on. And that's all good and fine. But I don't know if you've seen a good chatbot. At least I haven't, but if you have one, please let me know. But you know, we're moving now more towards augmentation, meaning that we know that computers are bad in a lot of stuff, so let's not try to use them to replace humans. Let's try to use them to augment the things we do. And a lot of people have done so already. There's artwork that's being sold at Christie's for over $400,000 and so on, which is pretty cool. We also have designs where we can apply new designs to old ones to create something new. We can make up music. We've been exploring how to do Beatles songs, how to do Metallica songs. There's a deep jazz generator, so you can create endless jazz for your dinner spectacles back at home. We can also do commercial stuff, which is like we can design car frames, we can design consumer products, and so on. And I mean, what's funny is that we usually try to find out that does this match what we're doing in the human space? Like, is this as good as humans? Or, as in this case, is it so bad that we can actually be fooled that it's made by humans? And I don't think this is sort of the right direction because I don't want to fool anyone that something's been made by a computer. I want it to be augmented by the same facts. So that let's use computers for the sake on what they're good at. So what's creative AI? I mean, I think it boils down to let's try to augment the expert. So every creative mind has biases, has personal experiences, has a sort of mindset to create certain types of stuff. And from time to time, it's pretty good to sort of think outside the box. And computers are actually pretty good at thinking outside the box. They're not something that you just look into their sort of historical review mirror because you can design them in a way that they explore a new space. Let's go back. This is what I wanted when we started making whiskey. This is what I wanted to hear from the master blender, from the creative mind, from the whiskey business, right? Because it was perceived that computers cannot make whiskey recipes because you need to be an expert, you need to understand the whole process, and because there's an infinite amount of possibilities that you can do, there's no way a computer can find an optimum within that. So what I wanted to hear was that. And this is the story on how we got there. No, still no. Maybe soon. No? Yes. There's three sort of things, main things that we're after. One is, of course, that we want to make great products. We don't want to make stuff with computers that they're not as good as the stuff we make with humans. So we want to make great products. That's the first thing, and let's not try to forget that. But when we design with machines, you can also, in a pretty objective way, learn what actually seems to appeal to masses, which is pretty good for design insights. Then the third one is, when you do stuff, when you create stuff with computers, you can find new ways to serve small segments, even with new products. We're used to recommendations serving us stuff in Netflix, but we're not used to the sort of idea of what if every one of us can have a custom-made whiskey at a bar. And that's something we can now probably do. And basic machine learning, and this is sort of, I think, which is the problem, is that we try to learn features, meaning that there's historical data. This is actually actual data from the project. So basically, here are the ingredients that goes into a recipe. In this case, because we're making whiskey, these are casks. So we can find the correlation that, okay, if you use a certain type of cask, the correlation to it being perceived as good is pretty high. If we do this for a creative process, what's going to happen is we're going to create the same recipes again. And we don't want to do that. In another way, if you just learn features, meaning that you learn the correlation between something you put into a product and the sales that it got, you're going to find out that you cannot mix, let's say, casks 2 and 8, because that will make something terrible out of it, because it's the sort of interaction between the ingredients that's the magic. So we need to do, let's call it controlled examination. So computers can explore spaces outside of what's previously been known. It just needs to happen within a space that's constrained. And the core idea is that from the sort of infinite space, we need to limit that to some possible options, and then we need to get samples out of it, and then try to understand which of them are good and which of them are not. And this is how we try to control machine generation in the terms of creative AI. So, we decided to make whiskey. This was a year ago when we first talked with the brand, that this is something we can actually do. And now it's in stores, or you can pre-order it. It went on sale in Sweden 1.5 weeks ago, and it was sold out in a day. So I'm guessing it was pretty good. But the sort of how we got there was that we got the previous recipe, so we have some historical data, and then for recipe we knew that, okay, this was in 3 competitions, it won a gold medal in one of them. Then we knew that, okay, these are the casks and these are the blends that the people at the brand, which is Macmurray in this case, preferred. And then we knew user ratings from whiskey sites and so on. And to get our sort of heads around that, we first need to figure out what is good. And there's a lot of problems because you have 2 types of uncertainty. You have vertical uncertainty, meaning that for all of the recipes, if customers have reviewed your products, like 70 products out of all of your 75 products, you can sort of trust that that's a pretty good value on how good it is, because there's so much reviews from the same source of reviews. But then for expert reviews, you only get like around a half. And then for awards, there's only a few of the sort of products that have been entered into competitions and so on. So using just awards data would not get us to the place that we want to go. So that's vertical uncertainty. And then there's horizontal uncertainty, meaning that one of your products can be reviewed by experts, by consumers, by awards, and by something else. But something else is only reviewed by customers, right? So does that mean that the latter one is worse than the previous one? Of course not. It could have won competitions. It could have won the hearts of the experts only if they would have had access to it. So there's uncertainty related to that as well. So the question goes, what do we want to actually achieve when we're designing stuff with computers? Do we want to win awards? Do we want to win customers' minds? Do we want to win the minds of experts? Or do we see that the brand itself knows best what is good and what is not? And this is a sort of decision that you need to make. So, you have horizontal, vertical uncertainty weights, which gives you scores. Meaning that for what is good is not like, this is good like in a score of 7 out of 10. This is good in 7 out of 10 plus minus something, depending on uncertainty of the vertical and horizontal axis. All right, then we need to choose a task. And this is the first sort of creative problem that we have. This is known to be a problem that only creative minds can actually do something about. So this is a sort of mind game, so you can think about it. Here's 100 tasks, which is what we started off with. And your job as a master blender is now to pick from 1 to 20 out of them with certain amounts, whatever you want, to make the best possible whiskey, because we're making a blend here. Quickly, you're going to understand that it's an infinite space. So there's an infinite amount of possibilities of how many different whiskeys you can make from 100 casks, that being the task. Then you also know that something is preferred by the public and something else is preferred by experts, which sort of throws you off a bit. And then finally you realize you're a computer nerd and you cannot taste anything. You need to solve this with computers, which is a bit difficult, right? But that's the starting point. So what did we do? To choose a cask, there's sort of 3 things you want to do. One is you need to understand, like, what are the reviews of the ingredients that you have? Do you know that some of them are like absolutely rubbish and you cannot use it for anything? Like, let's get that out, but it's going to still leave you with the majority of ingredients that you have. Then you need to understand what's the style of the brand, meaning that you need to understand which types of blends they are making. So you need to come up with something that's unique, but that's something that's still in line with the brand. You cannot make the brand something else that it is not. And then my favorite term, which is intelligent subspaces of infinity, which means absolutely nothing when you say it, is that because you have an infinite space of possibilities, you need some intelligence in which sort of the subspaces of that infinity are still relevant for us to explore. Third problem. You now know what's good. You know how to choose a cask. Now you need to pick an amount. Then you go back to the sort of same thing as before. You have previous amounts. You know that some ingredient is never used, let's say, over 50% of the recipe. You know that there's deviations. So like one cask can be used from 1% to 100% and anything between, which means that for that cask, we can explore the whole space from 0 to 100%. And it's still sort of fine in terms of what the brand is. And then you need to sort of widen it a bit. So we're going to explore new spaces as well. And the last problem is, like, if those are the ingredients to the machine problem, that we're trying to create a creative process, but we're trying to do it with machines, the last bit is how to put it all together. And this is a busy slide, and I'm sorry for that, but this is the sort of core idea that you can design sneakers, you can design food and beverage stuff, you can design how to make articles and so on. It's the same process. It starts with, you can start with like, let's explore without any previous biases, or you can say that let's explore elegant whiskies, meaning that let's not try to do a smoky one, let's do an elegant one, which still means you have an infinite space, but there's some style to it that you want to have. So that's the starting step. You can decide what's the starting point after which we're going to start generating. And the process goes like this. The generating part, you remember the problems that we have. The generating part is going to pick a cask, pick the amount, and then send it to the critic. And the critic is going to say, is this better or worse than the previous recipe that you just did? If it's better, you get to continue upon it. So you're going to make the next decision because you improved on what you did just before. And the critical bit, like why do we separate these two, is that because the discriminative part knows what's good, but the generative part does not know that. If we would sort of tell the generative part what is good and try to make it learn the features as we learned before, what's going to happen is it's going to start generating the same stuff all over again. So we cannot sort of leave it to the generator to know what's actually good. And this sort of mimics, I think, what we do in the sort of human creative process. Because if I'm writing an article, I write something, and then I look back at it, and I'm like, okay, this is shit. I'm going to write it again. I'm not constantly evaluating every word. I'm writing something, and then I'm like, okay, this is worse than I did before. I'm going to start again. This is what we're trying to do with computers now as well. That's what it looks like. But instead of 1,000 iterations, we run this 100 million times. And what's happening within the score there is that the critic is giving scores back to the generative process and saying that, okay, this is now like 86% good out of 100. And what's happening is it's always going up, but it goes down as well, because the generative process is making wrong turns almost as much as it's making the right ones. And what we want to happen is that when it goes down, it means that it's exploring a new space. It's exploring something that has not been done yet. If it's worse or not, it's up to the critic to decide. But once we run this 100 million times, it starts to converge in a way. And then we're going to end up with recipes that are new and unique and something that should taste good as well. And that's what we have in a bottle now. That's what we have in the stores now. And, you know, it's so cool to do computer stuff and get back a bottle of alcohol. That's not something you get to do a lot. So I'm proud of the whole team. I'm proud of the customer for being like crazy enough to do this type of thing. But my point here is that you don't need to use data to be data-driven only. You don't need to use data to do like looking in the rearview mirror only. You can do exploration of new spaces with computers, and that can augment any of the creative processes, whether you're making sliced bread or you're making sneakers. And that's what I want you to remember from this talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Jarno. What a stellar piece of work. I think this is kind of a, I hope that Jarno, Finland and Fourkind will be remembered by this kind of a stepstone in the alcohol business for making the thing happen. And I was actually, my reason for placing Jarno in this particular spot was that I was hoping that we'd be able to sample you the whiskey, but unfortunately it was became too popular, so it wasn't available anymore even in Systembolaget, where it was released earlier. I think we can get one comment or question from the audience, if anyone dares. I think you will be able to kind of stop Jarno on his way out. I will ask one thing, and that is that how do you, Jarno, feel about the agency in creation of this product? How much is this Jarno's whiskey and how much is this whiskey of the GAN network?
This is really little my whiskey because I wanted to make a smoky one and they didn't. So that was sort of. I'm a whiskey person. I like smoky whiskey, but we wanted to make an elegant one because this is the first time a lot of people will be trying whiskey because this is for technology geeks and designer geeks as well. It's for whiskey people. So we needed to make it in a way that it pleases the public as well. So this is, yeah, it's not my whiskey at all.
So you kind of revealed something about the weights. Okay, thank you, Jarno, so much. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks.